everyone doing out there? I'm Jeremy Langlois, coming to you live from Houmas House Estate and Gardens in the old kitchen here at the estate, and I just love this room. We're talking about how we are getting excited for when summer ends. We will do our cooking demonstrations in some other spots because we like being in here now because of the air conditioning that we get. But we do want to go. We love cooking outside as well, and we want to cook at some of the really beautiful, picturesque spots that we have here at Houmas House. But this is one of my favorite rooms here at the plantation, and we just love cooking here. Before we get started, man, it's so great to be back doing this again. It felt good just to be setting up. We missed last week because of Hurricane Laura, and luckily for us, we were pretty much unaffected by the hurricane. However, we can't say as much for our friends and neighbors over in the Lake Charles area, so our thoughts are definitely with them. I dedicate this recipe to them and wishing them a speedy recovery. We're sending some supplies and stuff like that to help them out, and we just hope the best for them. But with that said, we're going to go ahead and get started. So the dish we're doing today is our praline duck breast. And what I always enjoy, whether it's this dish or whether it's, say, whenever we cooked our signature soup here, our biscuit curry pumpkin crawfish corn, me personally, I always get a little joy, a little smile on my face when I get to prepare one of the items that was on our opening menu that we had in Latil's when we opened up on January 15th of 2005, when I was just a baby. And whenever we opened up Latil's, this was one of the dishes that was on our opening menu. And I really get excited still to this day to cook some of these things. And in fact, this dish has become a staple here at Houmas House. By far, our weddings that we do here, every single wedding will have our praline duck on it. People just love it. So I'm excited to share that with you today. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're cooking duck. Now this dish is very adaptable. The recipe will show up online shortly on our Facebook page, but it's also on our Houmas House website as well. All of our recipes we do, if you go to our Houmas House website, you have up top several menus, and one of them says resources. Click that, you'll get a drop-down menu, and then one of them says recipes. Click that and you'll see all the recipes we've done so far, plus several other ones that we've put up there in the past, and we continue to grow it every week. So this recipe, we're doing duck. However, let me tell you some great alternatives if you're not, duck might not be readily available. However, you do often see it in grocery stores. You can very easily adapt this to chicken, or what I think is killer as well, common item you can get is a pork tenderloin. A roasted pork tenderloin served with the same sauce and sweet potatoes, that would be fantastic. But how we did it in the restaurant was with duck breast. So let's go ahead and just talk about what we have here and some of the tricks that you need to know about preparing duck. So I'm a big fan of duck. I think it has a great flavor. It really speaks to that sportsman paradise game that we have right here in Louisiana. And the thing you need to realize about duck that some people may like, but I personally may be wary of, is duck can be very fatty, and that's because of the skin. The skin itself on duck is very fatty. So we need to consider that in our preparation and do a few things to account for the fat of the duck. And that is really crisping, making the skin crispy and rendering out some of the fat. So what I have here is a duck breast, and it's boneless. However, it still has the skin on it, and that's great because the skin has a ton of flavor, and we want to keep that on. If you are wary of that, you can cut the duck skin off. I wouldn't do that personally, but if you were to cut it off, actually skinless duck breast is healthier than chicken breast. But you get so much flavor in cooking for me, duck, something like that is a treat. So we want to still keep that skin on. It has a really fantastic flavor. But what I did do, if you take a closer look, is I just took a knife and I just scored a couple spots on the skin. Just cutting down, just cutting through the skin, but as soon as I get to the meat, I stop cutting, and now we have a few score marks, and that's going to help render out some of that fat. Because that's what we want to do. If we were to just cook duck without really focusing on that skin, you sometimes are going to have this flabby layer of duck skin on the outside of it. We don't want that. We want that to be crispy. So what we're going to do, I got a nice hot cast iron skillet here. You know I love my cast iron. I'm just going to pour a little bit of oil, only need a touch, because what we're going to do is I'm going to go down, got that great sizzle, exactly what we're looking for. I'm going to go down and just get that duck cooking skin side down. And the reason we didn't have to put a whole lot of oil into the skillet is because as this duck cooks skin side down, it's going to start to render out fat. You'll literally see the fat start to rise in the bottom of the skillet, and that's a good sign. It means that we're starting to extract some of that excess fat that we don't want. We can render that out and get a good crispy skin. Now, anytime I'm ever searing anything, I sear it over a really high heat. We just season this with a little salt and pepper, put it down. However, what I do, instead of this being on all the way turned up to high, I actually have it at about a medium high, because we are going to have it spend a good 5 or 6 minutes just on the skin side down. So if we had that temperature cranked up all the way, it might burn the skin, it might start to get a little black. But if we have it just at a medium high heat, it's going to keep searing, it's going to keep rendering out the extra fat, and that outside skin is going to start getting crispy, crispy, crispy. And that is the trick to this dish, and that's what we're looking for. So I'm doing nothing more than medium-high heat, duck breast in, and just let it render out. Every now and then you can come and give it a little move. You see it's starting to brown up, but that's got a long way to go. We want that to get really crispy. So while that's doing its thing, we're going to prepare a couple sides, and we're going to start with sauce. So the dish, so the sauce that we serve with this duck is a praline sauce. I have about half a cup of melted butter in here, and I'm going to start off with adding some brown sugar right into the pan. And this was a dish that we would always serve, for our sugar-bearing dinners. And Houmas House has a lot of history with sugar. Sugar was the main crop of this estate, so we love kind of honoring the past. And so a praline sauce is just perfect. A, because the flavor itself is going to go fantastic with the duck, but B, it kind of honors the history of the place as well. So that's just perfect. I'm just adding enough sugar to pick up that butter that we have in there. Now we're going to add a little bit of, this is just some corn syrup. And what this is going to do is, anytime you're cooking with sugar, you can sometimes get these sugar crystals that start to form in the sugar. And once you start to get these crystallized sugar crystals are almost like a virus. Once you get some, they kind of, they'll keep appearing, and next thing you know, this whole sauce will be ruined because you have all these sugar crystals going out throughout your whole sauce. So to prevent that, a little corn syrup will just knock that right out, and you don't have to worry about it. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, wait a second, butter, corn syrup, brown sugar, what are we cooking here, a dessert? Well, not necessarily. Now we have a lot of sweet elements into this, which sweet goes great with pork, goes great with duck. Now we want to start introducing some savory elements to it to start to get that balance. So what I have here is, this is something that we always have on hand in the restaurant, and that's some demi-glace. Demi-glace is a sauce made by reducing veal stock. However, if you don't have access to demi-glace, don't you worry out there, my friends. All you simply have to do is, you can just replace the demi-glace part of the recipe with a little bit of beef stock. And that'll be absolutely perfect for this. And now we start to get some of that good savory flavor in here. We're going to let that kind of come up to start to simmer. And now we're going to come and season it with a little bit of salt and a little bit of cracked black pepper. And now all I'm going to do now is add some pecans to this. Now I know I got friends all across the globe, all across the country, and the great debate, pecans or pecans. Now, I've gone to places and they say pecans all the time, and I just cringe because that's not right. It's not pecan. It's pecans. Am I right out there? A pecan is something that you use to prop up a broken bed to keep it from leaning. It's not something you put in problems. You put pecans in problems. Just saying. So now that we got the sauce ready to go, we got everything coming together, I'm going to come back to our duck breast. Take a look at it now. That skin side now has started to really get crispy, really get brown. Got a nice color and caramelization on the outside. And I don't know how well you can see that in my skillet, but where I started with just about a splash of olive oil to get it started, you'll now see all this oil here. Well, that's duck fat. Let me tell you, there's nothing wrong with duck fat. Great flavor, but we're actually rendering a lot of that out. That's allowing, by rendering it out, it's allowing that skin to get crispy, and that's why we didn't have to put so much oil in the beginning, because you're going to, just like cooking bacon, you're going to extract a lot of fat out of it. So now I'm going to flip it onto the other side, and this is where you want to have an oven going at about 350 to 400 degrees flip it over. I love using something like cast iron because I can grab this with a towel, I can go right into an oven, 400-degree oven, and we're gonna let it go for about 10 to 12 minutes. Now, duck is one of those big proteins that some people like their duck medium or mid-rare. To me, that's a little too undercooked. I like my duck around medium, mid-well. I don't like it to have too much pink. So that's going to be a preference on how you like it. If you like your duck a little bit more undercooked, well then leave it in for about 8 minutes. If you like it cooked more, leave it in well done. Leave it in for 15 minutes. That's completely up to you. But we're kind of searching to get an internal temperature of about 135 degrees for medium. That's what we're shooting for. So when we stick a thermometer in the middle of that duck, it's got that internal temperature. So I got my sauce, I got my duck cooking away in the oven. Let's put together some quick rustic sweet potatoes that are just going to be so simple. Now, I love sweet potatoes, and I think sweet potatoes are a perfect match for duck and pork. However, sometimes I do find with some sweet potato recipes, and especially paired with this recipe, sometimes when people make sweet potatoes, like sweet potato casserole, I always find it's too sweet, meaning they have too much brown sugar or too much of a crumble topping, and to me, it doesn't taste like a savory side, it tastes like a dessert. So I like to keep my sweet potatoes really simple. I have some sweet potatoes that I just peeled and boiled to they're soft to the touch. Still warm, but they break apart real easy. You can stick a fork and they are fork tender. And I treat these sweet potatoes very simply. A little bit of salt, a little bit of black pepper. I don't like to add too much to it because sweet potatoes don't have all that starch that a white potato has, so it might not hold up with the body of it. If you start adding a lot of butter to it, the butter will start seeping out because there's nothing to hold it in there. But this is just a little bit of melted butter. That's going to go in. Now, I do like to enhance. I do like a little bit of sweetness, but not a whole lot. So what I do is I'm just going to watch how much I put. I mean, if you know anything about me and my cooking, I actually usually get teased. I almost try to find reasons to put Steen's cane syrup and everything. I love Steen's cane syrup. If you don't have access to a cane syrup, a little honey, a little molasses, just a tablespoon, a capful, just to give it a little bit of sweetness would be perfect for this. I'm actually going to take a whisk because I want this to stay simple. Again, I only have a few ingredients here. The boiled sweet potatoes, butter, salt, pepper, and a splash of that cane syrup. And now I'm just going to crush it up. Crush it up and kind of give it a whip. If you were in your kitchen and you got a KitchenAid mixer or a Cuisinart mixer or something like that, you throw it in there. The potatoes themselves are so soft, they just kind of instantly puree. We're going to give that a taste. Again, I'm looking to have a good, flavorful sweet potato. That butter is going to be good, but my whole goal is to not have it too sweet. Potatoes themselves are naturally sweet, and we just want to enhance that slightly. So now that we're at that point, we are pretty much ready to go. Now these are some duck breasts that I did earlier, and I pulled them out of the oven after they went for about 10 minutes. And anytime you have, whether it's a steak or whether it's a duck breast, some meat that we're going to slice it. Anytime you're going to slice meat, you always want to let the protein rest for a few minutes on your cutting board before you slice it. Well, why do you want to do that? Well, A, you want to do it because what you're cutting, this is a muscle. So by letting it sit for a second, it's exposed to all this heat, and everything is cooking and tightening up. So by letting it sit for a second, it starts to rest, and all the juices naturally start to go to the outside of the protein as it's under that duress and all that heat. So by letting it sit for a second, the muscle relaxes, and the juices inside can start to redistribute through the meat. So if you were to just cut it right away, a lot of times you'll notice a lot of juice will just spill right on your cutting board, and we want to keep that in there. So we're going to let that rest for a second, and then we're going to go ahead and just start to plate this up. I got those sweet potatoes. Again, these are a little chunky. Personal preference for me. I like it a little rustic sometimes. However, if you don't want all them chunks, you can put this in a food processor or a little hand blender, and we give it a quick little zap, and that would be perfect for that. But I like it a little rustic, so I'm just going to go right on the plate. I'm going to go ahead to my duck right here. It's got that great crispy skin. I like to give it a bunch of slices, and I'm going to fan it around. It just makes it a little bit easier to eat, and it gives it a great presentation. Let's get that sliced, and then we're going to place that duck. Now, again, it was so important that as we look at this, here's the skin on it. You'll see that there's not a big gap between the skin and the actual meat itself, and that's because we really spent that extra time rendering that skin and pulling out as much extra fat as possible and letting it get crispy. My main complaint, if I do have duck, is whenever this skin isn't crispy and it's a little flabby. That's just unappealing to me. But if we just really give it a good hard sear and really just let that go on a nice medium high heat, you don't have to worry about it. It's going to come out perfect. So we're going to put that around, nice crispy skin. And then this praline sauce just goes so perfect with this duck. Again, if you're not going to use duck, pork tenderloin, chicken would be great. But we're going to just really get some of that sweet and savory praline sauce right on top of it. A couple little garnishes and you are done, my friends. I always like having a little bit of herb oil, gives a great color and a little bit of richness. Some fresh herbs right at the last second out of the garden is always fantastic. So we're going to just put a couple fresh herbs on there. And there you go. This is Houmas House's world famous praline duck breast with sweet potatoes. Thank y'all so much for coming in with us, and we'll see y'all next week. Y'all take care.